This is a quick video review of the TNF North Face Westwind versus the Macpac Olympus. Both fairly rarish tents in the UK. So it was just really to give people on YouTube a quick comparison if you're looking at either of these. I bought this Westwind about 2 years ago. They're now discontinued. However, it's a bomb-proof classic tent, and if I can give you some idea, we're actually standing in some strong winds here, and you'll see the Macpac Olympus is quivering about with the wind, whereas the Westwind tends to act much more like a geodesic. They're both 3-hoop tents, both 4-season rated for mountain use. The main differences I've noticed in using these back-to-back is the TNF is probably the more stable in high winds. It's really pitched much more like a geodesic. The trade-offs are it's slightly smaller, and if I take you inside here, you'll see the door entry is one side only and slightly limited, but it has quite a long vestibule which is good for storing gear and gives you just enough room for cooking. The headroom's a wee bit shorter, so if you're like me, about 5'8", you can cook relatively comfortably. If you're any taller, it's going to be a bit cramped, but then it's ideal for just carrying less weight or for summit attempts. It's well guyed. If you just take a quick look around the outside, you'll see there's a lot of guying points, which makes it nice and flexible in terms of whichever way the wind is coming from, but you'll see how low the rear end is. It's extremely tight and very aerodynamic, and well guyed at the back, and inside you'll see just through the nylon there is the mesh at the bottom, which can be unzipped and vented, which does help to some extent, but it can suffer from condensation fairly severely in still weather, so you're best to vent it as best you can if there's two of you inside. Let me just take you back round and we'll go quickly inside the Westwind just to give you a look from the inside. Sorry there's no edits on this, I apologise, it's my first time doing this. If you have a look in the interior, you'll see it's actually fairly wide at the midpoint, and it's actually very high at the midpoint too. It just shows you the rear end with the venting. And then if we turn around and look out the front here, which I'll try and do, you'll see there's a nice hooked door there. Again, it's got the usual mosquito mesh and solid, and it's got a very long vestibule in this case with just enough room to cook. The midpoint in the tent's pretty good. You can sit up, two of you could play cards or comfortably spend some time here in a storm. And as I say, it's extremely stable. It's one of the strongest tents I've ever had, and I've had a lot of tents. This one would be really good in extreme weather. What I'll do is I'll come outside now and we'll head towards the Macpac Olympus, which I've bought here as a potential replacement for the Westwind. The Westwind is great, but has some grumbles about just certain details on it. It's kind of difficult to pitch. There's no adjustable ladder straps on the fly, whereas in the Macpac there certainly is. The main thing you notice about the Macpac is probably slightly less stable, i.e. just prone to a bit of wobble and shudder. But the big difference I think is probably potentially in the room. It's a big vestibule, wider but not as long as the TNF, so there's plenty of room to cook. Great venting on this one, which is very important I think in wet weather. You've got 2 vents on either end, which if I can just lift up for you here, you can see are mesh, and you can zip up so you can completely waterproof them. Not so many guying points, or at least not so many guy lines supplied as standard. There's actually another set of 4 guying points on this tent, which they don't supply you lines with, but I'll probably end up having to use at some point just to make it that bit more stable. Inside on the Macpac, big difference here is it's longer and higher generally. This is the back door here. There is actually a rear entrance to the tent. Although there's no storage space at the far end here, you can actually access and enter and exit the tent, same as my North Face V25, which can be quite handy if somebody's cooking and you just want to bail out for whatever reason. So that's good. The pockets are massive, so you can store a lot of gear in here. I'll just show you around there. It's probably no wider, possibly even slightly narrower at its widest point than the North Face Westwind, But overall it has a much more, I would say, airy and roomier interior, and probably a more comfortable place to sit out a night in a storm. Let me come outside again, I'll just try and give you a better view of the size of the interior. What else about the exterior of the Macpac? It's also got snow valances down at the front of the tent here. Just show you from a distance. You can see the two of them with the Westwind in the background. I'll take you around to the rear of the Macpac. Again, double vented. Door slightly less flexible on this side, but it doesn't really matter because it's more a bit of an emergency exit. To be honest, I think this is possibly slightly extraneous. They could probably save a bit of weight, save a bit of cost and remove the back door. However, some people may favour that. Let me take you around the front again, and I'll just show you zipping up on the door here. Good flexible door in terms of number of places you can zip it, the number of variations you've got in terms of wind. You can see you can, if I come out here, so you can vent this from the top, and you can, it means if in deep snow you can also enter the tent from the top and stand into the vestibule, shed your gear and then climb in where it's dry. All in all, two great tents I would say. The North Face, as I say, is more difficult to get hold of now, but if you want a lighter, more bomb-proof option, it's probably the one to use for severe winter and expedition conditions. The Macpac, I would say, is not much different, but more roomy, a lot more flexible in terms of pitching and strength. Is not quite as good as the Westwind, slightly more, how would you say it, probably just a wee bit more flexible than the Breeze, but they're both brilliant.